Today, on episode 48 of Rail Talk, John and I break down a fabulous weekend at Belmont at Saratoga. I'm Joe Bianca. I'm an ownership advisor at West Point Thoroughbreds. And yeah, Belmont at Saratoga is on my mind, but you know what else is on my mind? Emerald Downs. Look, I got the sweet swag.
What?
You got to go see the T-Rex World Championship races at Emerald Downs. Shout out to Joe and Wes for sending me all this cool stuff.
Wow. Color me jealous, Joe. I am Jonathan Green, general manager at DJ Stable, and I thought I was going to have the coolest swag because I got a new hat. But no, you trumped me again with the Emerald Downs stuff. First, it was Left Eye Lisa shirt, and now Emerald Downs T-Rex Racing. I can't compete with the next generation. I'm out.
That's the thing. This is a new running segment on this show where I'm going to make John jealous of my T-shirts. Let's start the show. Rail Talk is sponsored by the Green Group, the number one accounting firm in the horse business. There's one reason, and we know that reason by now. There's no other CPA firm that knows the industry like they do. Len and DJ Stable got over 200 horses, won over 2,500 races, got over 800 clients, probably close to 1,000 clients in the horse business right now. And there's a special opportunity for listeners of Rail Talk, and we know there's a ton of you out there. And if you don't know Len and the Green Group, they'll introduce you with a complimentary, confidential half-hour consultation, guaranteeing you'll get value. Call them up at, what's that number, Michael?
732-634-5100.
Or hit them up at greenco.com. And Len has, like I said, a guarantee, unequivocally guarantees will find you value and savings. Donate to your favorite charity or whatever you want. He's not worried. He's always found value before, and he knows he can do it with you, but you don't got to take it from me. Listen to this satisfied customer and another proud sponsor of Rail Talk, Mark Taylor.
We use the Green Group for all of our accounting. He's actually doing our son's, I just met with my son this morning, and the Green Group's working on his taxes. They're really looking with a goal in mind to reduce your tax liability as opposed to just processing taxes. And I've dealt with people that handled it that way, and this is much different. It's just a completely different experience. You're dealing with a group of people who really understand the business you're in, and they're able to help you better as a result.
So that number, once again, 732-634-5100 or greenco.com. Go hit up Len and the Green Group. You won't be disappointed. So it was a terrific week and weekend of racing at Belmont at Saratoga. The first Belmont at Saratoga was a smashing success. We're going to do something a little different in a little bit. John's going to interview me because I was up there, and obviously I was the center of attention all week at Saratoga. Nobody was focusing on anything else. So the people want to know, what did Joe Bianca think of Belmont at Saratoga? So we'll get into that and talk a little bit more about the experiential side of Belmont at Saratoga. But let's talk about the racing first because it was terrific. There was one awesome performance after another. I honestly don't even really know where to begin, but I guess we'll begin with the Belmont itself. It was a really exciting race. Shout out to Dornock, who won at 17-1 in the Belmont. And shout out to Arian Pedigrees, as we'll throw up the pedigree page here for Dornock, who's obviously a full brother to Mage. So not bad for Good Magic and Puka to produce the Kentucky Derby winner in 2023 and the Belmont winner in 2024. My guess is she's going to be going back to Good Magic a time or two in the future. It was a really exciting race, and it was made more exciting and more intriguing by Mindframe, who looked like he was going to run down Dornock, drifting out in mid-stretch under Irad Ortiz and then diving back towards the inside and almost running him down, but not quite being able to do it. Danny Gargan was very, very high on Dornock from the jump, and he had a little bit of a disappointing year, I felt like, so far. Even though he won the Fountain of Youth, it wasn't very impressive. He didn't run well in the Bluegrass or the Derby, but so this was a real redemption arc for him. Jason Worth had some great footage of him reacting to the win in the Saratoga boxes, and he's a real deal, horse guy. Like, I see him at the sales. Like, he's not a Johnny come lately. He's really into this, so that was cool to see him win. And I think that this is. It's so interesting because I had people, West Point partners, asking me like who I like before the race, and one of them like Mindframe. And I said, you just got to be careful with these horses that are lightly raced. He only had two races coming in. He obviously was very impressive both times, but experience counts for something. And maybe I'm wrong, but I think if he had run 7 or 8 times, he would not have done that in the stretch and gotten spooked by whatever it was, the crowd, the whip, whatever, and he would have won that race. He's obviously got a bright future, but that just added to the intrigue and the fascinating nature of this race. John, what was your takeaway from the Belmont?
Well, I think you hit on a couple of key points, Joe. Number one is that that race in particular, Belmont, was chock full of good horses. We talked about the Acorn in the last show. We talked about a couple other races, and we were, I think, a little neglect in not mentioning just the powerful entries in the Belmont. Really from top to bottom. There was, maybe one or two horses in there where you kind of scratched your head, but for the most part, you look top to bottom, and like the Wine Steward was one of the long shots, and he had never been worse than second in his career. Honor Marie was one of the long shots, and like going into the Derby, I think you and I both picked him as one of our top 4 or 5 horses in the Derby. So it was a really strong group. It also reminded me of, like, there were over 50,000 fans that were there. And I know if you tried to get from point A to point B, you had to kind of meander your way through all the crowds. And that's exactly what it looked like Sierra Leone and Mindframe was doing. They were not going on straight lines. They were going like a roundabout ways, in order to get to the finish line first. And I think you hit it on the head with Mindframe. And that is, he's a very, very talented horse. And if he had a couple more races under his belt, especially a close race where, maybe he had to be hit once or twice down the stretch. I really believe that was like the first time that leather hit that horse's skin in his racing career. And he spooked from it. He definitely spooked from it. He when Irad was hitting him left-handed, he went out to the outside fence. When he hit him right-handed, he started to work his way back towards the inside. And as silly as it sounds, that's one of the problems with having such a talented horse, is that, when in the maiden race, when he was even money and he won by double digits, nobody got close to him. Irad never even showed him the whip. When he won the allowance race by 7, from gate to wire, same thing. He probably doesn't even know what it felt, what a whip would feel like at that point. But coming down the stretch, it looked like he was a winner. And he took, kind of a couple of inconsistent steps when he was, going back and forth. And I think he probably should have won the race. That being said, Dornoch fulfilled his destiny and got the grade 1 and got a one of the Triple Crown wins under his belt. And really, Joe, you look at the 3rd and 4th place horses with Sierra Leone and Honor Marie and the class of this field. It was a tough race. It was a legit, silly as it sounds, it was a legitimate grade 1, a legitimate Belmont, because God knows we've seen some of them where you go, why are they even running this race? It's not, there's no interest and no excitement. But Joe, I saw a stat that I thought was very interesting, and this is the 6th straight year that there has been a different winner in the Derby, Preakness, and Belmont. 6th straight year. So we have not had a horse win more than one Triple Crown race in the past 6 years. To me, that says a lot of things. You can either say, well, that shows the depth of field of the 3-year-olds every year, or it shows that, like, maybe these distances are too far. We're asking them to do too much. I don't know. You can take a lot out of it, but I thought that for sure this was a very hard fought win for Dornoch, and it was great for the industry because, as you said, Jason Worth was legitimately over the moon excited and expressed his enthusiasm basically to anybody who would listen. And God knows we need that in this industry.
Yeah, well, and to have those crossover, I mean, he doesn't play baseball anymore, but he's pretty well known in other sports. Just to have that crossover attention from a guy from another sport being so into racing might get a couple of people to say, hey, why is this guy who I know from this other thing so excited and so into this? Right. So I think that's always a good thing. A couple other notes. Sierra Leone ran a great race, but again, this is why I never take horses like him at short prices. He just needs too much to happen for him. He doesn't get out of the gate well, and he ran terrific. He was flying late, but and maybe he wins if they're going a mile and a half instead of a mile and a quarter. But I just never trust these deep closers at short prices, and he's disappointed more often than not in terms of getting the job done. The other thing is, it was just a fabulous Triple Crown season. And, as you're mentioning, a lot of times in the past, if there wasn't a Triple Crown on the line, it's like, snooze, like why we even pay attention. I did not feel that way this season. I thought all three races were great. They had great storylines. Obviously, you had Mystic Dan in the thrilling Kentucky Derby. You had Seize the Grave for Dwayne Lucas winning the Preakness, and then you had a Belmont field with another really exciting finish, and everybody showed up. Mystic Dan was there. Seize the Gray was there. You had a bunch of new shooters. You had Sierra Leone, who was favorite in the Derby, and there was no lack of intrigue or star power, I think, in any of these races. And most importantly, everybody came back safe. We had 3 outstanding weeks of racing, and every horse came back to their barn safely, and there were no catastrophic injuries. And that, it's obviously, I've said this before, it's not the kind of thing that on its face, it's not the kind of thing that we should be celebrating. But with the turmoil that this industry has gone through in recent years, with the breakdowns and last year at Churchill Downs, I do think it's something to be celebrated and something to be proud of, that we had hundreds of horses, if not over 1,000 horses competing in these races at these huge racetracks, and everything was okay. The racetrack safety was top notch. There were no drug positives, at least as far as we know. So this is something to build on for the future.
Did they get your blood and urine test back yet, Joe?
No comment.
It was just sitting there. But the other thing is, you mentioned all the horses that went into the gate and came home safely. I think that's a direct result of the fact that, a couple people on the show, I won't name names, are on HISA advisory boards. And I think that was a direct result of their influence in it.
John never hesitant to pat us on the back for things that are way above our head and above our pay grade. But no, I honestly, it's just, there were so many positive headlines and no negative headlines from this Triple Crown season, and we need that. And it was, like I said, usually no Triple Crown on the line, who cares? But not this year. There was so much intrigue from all 3 races. Let's talk a little bit about the other races, because it was a phenomenal weekend. Tons of grade 1s. Torpedo Anna is the headliner of the non-Belmont races, I think. And she is just so clearly the best 3-year-old filly in the country. And I think that if Mystic Dan were not in the Belmont, Kenny McPeek would have run her in the Belmont Stakes, and I think she would have been competitive. And she's just one of these horses who shows up every single time, no matter what the pace scenario is. She can go to the front, she can sit off the lead, and she crushed that field. We talked about before the race what a stacked field that was in Acorn, and she toyed with them. Yeah. And she is just she's awesome. She does everything you could possibly ask of a horse. $40,000 FASIC grad. And she's just been nails, and she's gonna take some catching for a 3-year-old filly champion, because now with the Kentucky Oaks and the Acorn in her pocket, she's just head and shoulders above this class of 3-year-old fillies. And I would like to see her go against the boys. I know people think that that's she shouldn't. It's like sexist against horses. Against female horses, like they shouldn't have to run against the boys to prove their mettle, and she doesn't. She's awesome no matter what. But I do like to see trainers and horses step outside of their comfort zone and do something out of the ordinary, and I think Kenny McPeek will do that, maybe in the Travers. The other horse, and John was plenty to get to, so we can keep going on this, but the other horse I want to mention before I toss it back to you is Cogburn, because I thought that was a misprint. Did I steal your thunder?
Yeah, you did.
Sorry, bud. Sorry about that. That's why I lead. That's why I lead, man. you gotta reel me in sometimes. But no, I thought that was I won't go too far with it, but I thought that was a typo when I looked at the time. 59-4 for 5.5 furlongs. I was like, no way that can be right. But then I looked at the rest of the fractions, and I was like, holy shit, this horse did run under a minute for 5.5 furlongs. He's the best turf sprinter in America. He's probably the best turf sprinter I've seen since God knows what. I can't even think of another one that really got me going like that. 59-4 for 5.5 furlongs. And that turf course had taken some rain. Like, obviously it didn't play soft, but it had taken some rain over the past couple of days. Man, was he impressive. And show me another turf sprinter in the world. I'm sure our buddy Andrew Stewart from Arion will give me like an Aussie or a New Zealand turf sprinter that he loves. But to me, I'll take him against any turf sprinter in the entire world right now. Go ahead, John.
New course record, Joe. I mean, you mentioned sub 1 minute for 5.5 furlongs, and a new course record.
It's a new North American record. It's a North American record.
Yep. I mean, that's even more mind blowing. And ever since they switched, I mean, he was a good sprinter, and then they switched him over to turf, and he's got 5 wins and 6 starts now. on the turf. And the one race he didn't win, he lost by 3/4 of a length. So it's like ever since they moved him to the grass, he just took the next step up. And it seems like the firmer the better for him as far as the course goes. 111 Beyer, 111 for a turf sprinter. Again, really impressive. And that was a great race, a great betting race, especially. You had the not this time exacta with Cogburn and Arzak. You had oh, by the way, Charlie Appleby actually brought a horse in and didn't win, which makes news with the Philly Star of Mystery, who ran third in that race. And Coppola, I thought ran a credible race also, but it was just a really good, solid field, and Cogburn just put them all in their rearview mirror.
Yeah, he was incredible. A couple other performances I want to mention. I mean, it was just one great race after another. Idiomatic and randomized in the Ogden Phipps. I mean, I needed Idiomatic so badly, and she was so much the best in that race. Like, she broke slowly, was wide around both turns. Randomized got to just cruise along on the lead. I honestly thought Florent Giroux should have gone to the front. Like, I understand, like, when you break a little slowly, you don't want to use too much energy and put the horse on the lead. But I thought he let Randomized get away from him a little bit and get away with those soft fractions. And still, she dug in and just lost the head bob. She's terrific. She's, again, another one of those horses who, she can make the lead, but she can run any kind of style. She's clearly the best fillier mare in the country. I don't care what the result was on Saturday. How about the Belmont Gold Cup? 2-mile race, and the Gray Wizard for Graham Motion gets up in the last jump. Imagine getting nailed in the last jump of a 2-mile race. Yeah. Like that's a tough one to stomach. But yeah, there was just one Bookham Dano in the Alan not the Alan Jerkins, the Woody Stevens. Yeah. He's probably I mean, he's awesome, and that was a little bit of redemption after he got nailed in the Saudi race. I mean, we could just go on and on. These are the weekends, these are the weeks that remind us why we love racing, and especially the buzz, and we'll get to it in a minute, but the buzz on the grounds at Saratoga was just so much greater than it would have been at Belmont, and it was just every single race seemed not to disappoint, and we loved every minute of it.
And again, you took a little bit of thunder from me because there were so many great races.
You had your chance. Time you stopped.
I know.
You stopped at Cogburn. You could have kept going.
It just goes to show, great minds think alike. We landed on pretty much the same races. Randomized I thought was interesting because from the one hole, Jose Rosario had to go. He had to send her at that point. And I think Florent Giroux's thought on Idiomatic was, I'm on the best horse in the race. I just want to keep her clear. And if I can stalk Randomized, that's just as good as that's even better than me going head to head and trying to put her away where we both might get buried at that point. But it was a little bit of a surprise for me to see Randomized hold on and go gate the wire the way she did. Again, a 99 Beyer, which is a career best for her. But Idiomatic is such a pleasure to watch run. I mean, she's just really fun because we're on bonus time with her. If anybody else other than Juddmonte owned that filly, she'd be in the breeding shed right now. She'd be a mommy. She wouldn't be racing still. So it was like a gift that they gave to thoroughbred racing by having her come back and run again as a 5-year-old. So that's that group. Bookham Dano, again, Joe, I'm more of a pedigree snob, and I would look at a Bucaro and say, oh well, what does this horse have to do with running against some of the best of the best? He doesn't know that he's not a gun runner or he's not an into mischief. All he does is win, and all he does is win races under a mile. And I think, as a fellow Jersey bred, I appreciate the fact that he's running against the royally bred and the blue bloods and just leaving them all in the rearview mirror. Derek Ryan, I've known since he was an exercise rider, at Monmouth Park, and I think he will tell you that he was almost done training. He was almost at the end of his rope as far as wanting to train anymore. And then he got Bookham Dano, and all of a sudden his career has been rejuvenated. One of the co-breeders, again, talk about old timers in the business. One of the co-breeders was Brightview Farm. Brightview Farm, Christine Connolly was one of the first people I ever met in racing, umpteen years ago. I'm not going to say how long ago because Christine's going to beat me up if I say how long our relationship goes by. But she was very influential in my early days of racing. and kind of sat me down and taught me some things about the breeding industry and racing. And I was really pleased to see that one of her homebreds is just picking off horses and now has a grade one. I think Christine's bred grade one winners before, but I know this is the most recent one. And obviously it's Buchero's first grade one winner. And there's a horse that's on the move now, Joe, where he went from Florida and now he's in New York. And, if he keeps getting some runners, he may end up, right back in the bluegrass state, with some of the bigwigs. But that was an interesting race, especially because I think a lot of people were expecting, they were expecting the Nash to come back and win that race. And Prince of Monaco, who I thought ran a credible race coming off a layoff since the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Again, a tough race, a legitimate grade one race. And it was good to see a Jaybird win the race. We didn't mention the Hillendale Met Mile yet, and what National Treasure did in that group, and the way he buried that field, coming off his fourth place finish in the Saudi Cup. I think it's worth mentioning, that now that horse has over, I think it's like $5.5 million of purse earnings in 13 starts. So. Tip of the cap to National Treasure and the fact that he won another grade one race, representing California over in New York. And then you've been very, very, very good and about not mentioning this, because I would have started off with this because I'm an egomaniac. But Ohana Honor ran a huge race, I thought, in the Manhattan, in a very stacked Manhattan, and going a mile and 3/16 for the first time, and dead heated and finished third in a race that was just Euro rich. Between Nation's Pride, who ran second in the race, and of course Measure Time, who basically you don't see too many Euros go right to the front and try to steal a race from there. But that's what that's what Measure Time did, and Buick took him right from the gate and said, you're going to be up close, and it's not too unusual with the way his racing style is. But that being said, it's unusual for a Euro to be showing that. But I was very impressed with Ohana Honor coming in, and he was, Joe, he was like 20-1, and he ran third in a grade one. So he really upset the apple cart for a lot of bettors. But more importantly, he showed that he can run with those kind of horses.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioning that this is his second consecutive race that he ran with those horses. He beat Nation's Pride last time in the Man of War. So he can, it's frustrating sometimes because, we got a couple horses in the barn that I feel like turf horses that can compete with every single American turf horse. And then Charlie Appleby sends a different monster every time to win.
Yep.
But we were so proud of him. And like the way he had to run too, because he got stopped a little bit behind the retreating speed on the turn. He had to dive through at the inside. Would have been very easy for him to say, whatever, I'm not doing this today. But he put his head down and got up for the dead heat for third. And I think a couple more strides, he would have been second. And he's gotten better and better and better for Shug. He got a 100 buyer. So we like him as a potential Breeders' Cup turf horse later in the year. So thanks for mentioning that. And that's why I love West Point. Like we were watching on the big screens by the Jim Dandy bar, and it took forever for them to put up who was third because it was a dead heat. And the photo, like even now looking at the photo, I'm like, they just guessed. They have no freaking clue.
They had no direct,
who was third, which right.
They had no direct vantage point of that, which is why I think it took such a long time for them to be like, do we flip a coin? Do we just go ahead and just say they're both winners?
Yeah, just like when in doubt, call it a dead heat. But when they did put that up, you never seen so many people so excited to be put up for third. Like that's why I love the West Point partners, because that was a big deal for us and for him to be grade one placed, and we exploded as if we had won the race. So yeah, shout out to Ohana. And I'm with you on National Treasure. I thought he was a little bit of a phony Preakness winner last year, one of the worst Preaknesses I've ever seen, but he's proven his mettle since then. He was great when he almost beat Cody's Wish in the dirt mile last year. He obviously won the Pegasus earlier this year, and he blew everybody away in the Met Mile, took all the heat up front, kicked away. So he's definitely a legit horse. And then one other horse I wanted to mention, it wasn't a stake. I believe it was an allowance race. Arthur's Ride early in the day on Thursday crushed him from Belmont. He got a 111 buyer, and in a handicap division that's kind of crying out for stars, he might be one to look for in the second half of the season. But yeah, like I said, we could go on and on and on. It was just an awesome week of racing, and we're so blessed to have these opportunities, to have these horses strut their stuff on the big stage. And again, all come back safely and have the headlines be entirely positive. It was a terrific, terrific week.
I just wanted to mention, we talk all the time about sire power and the importance of stallions in a pedigree. And certainly during the course of the weekend, the old guard, Good Magic, Frankel, Quality Road, Not This Time, Curlin, Nyquist had 2 winners, Into Mischief. They all had winners representing their respective stallions. But also you had a Buchero, Prospective, Orpin, Fast Anna, Caravaggio, and Lord Nelson win, equally good races, grade 1s, grade 2s during the course of that weekend also. And it just goes to show that it's not just the top stallions that are winning. I mean, they get the headlines because they're the most, they have the most notoriety and the highest stud fees. But you can find a good horse from a lot of different places if you just kick over enough rocks and you keep looking and you keep searching. So, again, I tend to be more of a stallion snob, and then you have weekends like this where you go, well, wait a second, all of these other representatives of these, not as household name stallions, through good winners and have representation in these graded stake races. It made me sit up and take notice.
Well, that reminds me, we got a filly available at West Point by Salamini. And Salamini had a big-time New York bred, New York Sired Stakes winner on Sunday, which was New York Bred's showcase day at Saratoga. But to your point, she's fast, and I think she's going to be really good. You don't have to be by Into Mischief or Tap It to get a good horse.
And you guys sold out on the Alternation, which, again, is another stallion that isn't even in the States anymore. But great athlete.
Like that.
Yep.
It's you need the individual. Obviously, you have a better chance with the high class stallions, but you're also paying a much bigger premium for them. There's good horses to be found everywhere. Great point, John. We saw that this weekend. Rail Talk is sponsored by Facing Tipton. Lots of news going on in Facing Tipton land. Cairo Consort sold for a record $820,000 to top the June digital sale. 60 horses sold overall for $2.247 million. So Cairo Consort established a new digital sale record with that price. She won the Catch a Glimpse Stakes and was placed in the Natalma and the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf. She was the sovereign champion, 2-year-old filly in Canada as a 2-year-old. She was a grade 3 winner at 3, and she's got another stakes winner this year. So those digital sales just keep getting better and better in terms of quality. It's not like, I feel like when the digital sales, I'm not speaking about Facing here in general, I'm just talking in general. When the digital sales first started, it was kind of just like big barns, lower class horses that they just kind of didn't really have a use for. No, now you can get legitimate stars in those digital sales, and no one does it better than Facing Tipton. So that was great to see. We got the Mid-Atlantic June 2-year-olds in training catalog, which is now online. That'll be held 2 weeks from today on June 25th. We're recording this on June 11th at 2 p.m. at the Maryland State Fairgrounds, obviously, in Timonium, Maryland. We got the catalog for the July sale, which is now online. Obviously, a great place to find good horses. We'll be at the Facing Tipton Select Yearling sale at Saratoga. And John, just as you were saying in the last segment, you don't have to have a catalog full of Into Mischiefs and Tappets and Curlins to produce good horses. And we've seen that in the July sale in particular, that you can find horses by quote unquote less sexy stallions who go on to do great things on a racetrack.
You can find them anywhere. And that's why you have to go to every sale. And that's why you have to, turn over every stone, because there are good horses to be found everywhere. And yeah, maybe there's not as much black type as what you would hope in order to be able to get a really good horse. But some horses just make their own black type. Some horses make their own page, and proof is in the pudding with a lot of these horses. Joe, I thought it was interesting what you're saying about the digital sale, because now it's a situation where it's not like, okay, I'm going to put a bunch of horses in and hope that people come to see it. Now it's a race to see who's going to be the first 7-figure digital sale graduate. I mean, that's how close they're getting. We were involved in buying a horse that's in the 600s, selling a horse in the 700s. Now there's a horse that's sold in the 800s. It's getting incrementally closer where you're going to, and then that's going to be the new glass ceiling that's going to get broken through. So, I would definitely put horses in the sale and roll the dice and see what can happen, because what's the worst case scenario? If you don't sell it, the horse has not missed a day of training, and prices are going up and people are getting more and more confident of buying on that platform.
So with that, we're just about ready for Jon Green to ask me, Joe Bianca, about Belmont at Saratoga. It was a very unique experience. I got a lot to say, good, bad, in between, mostly good. But John, take it away. What do you want to know?
So, Joe, you and I don't know each other very well. So, give us a little background on your on your experiences in horse racing and how you ended up being a co-host. No, just kidding. Joe, I'm so stoked to do this.
We'll go through it if you want.
We don't have that much time. You have a long, lengthy career. We know.
Give the people what they want. More
exactly.
Joe.
More
Joe by the barrel full.
More Bianca. Exactly. More cowbell and more Bianca in that order, maybe. So they said it was 50,000 people there. It looked like it was probably like 1.5 times that. What was it like, feeling that kind of energy and that many people at an event that was unique this year?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start a little bit negative. It was too crowded on Saturday. Like it just was. Like Saratoga is not a big enough place. This was more people than they've ever had for the Travers, and the Travers gets uncomfortably crowded. It just you can say like you're capping it at 50,000. First of all, I find it hard to believe that there were only 50,000 people there. But even if you do cap it at 50,000, to me that's like the equivalent of capping the Belmont at like 150,000 because of how big Belmont Park is, or Belmont Park was. Relative to Saratoga, and it just was uncomfortably crowded. The bathroom lines were too long. The bar was just uncomfortably packed. It was like a nightclub where there's just too many people, and that to me is the only one of the only negatives from the week. It just go down to 45,000, please. Like it was awesome, an awesome week, and the buzz was incredible, but it just got too uncomfortable on Saturday, and it was a little bit of a mess. But overall for the week, it was phenomenal. Like we had 22,000 on Thursday, 27,000 on Friday, way more people than we would have gotten if the races were held at Belmont. And it was just, the vibe was so great. I think in part because no one really expected to be there. This was such a novelty and everyone was so stoked. And we're like, I can't believe we're at Saratoga in early June. So it was like the mood of the crowd was undeniably positive. It helped that we had a ton of great racing and a bunch of safe racing. Yeah. And the weather, for the most part, stayed away. There were a couple smaller storms, but it was supposed to be a washout for 4 days, and it wasn't. For the most part, we had beautiful weather in the 70s, which is great because I'm a sweater, and if it was 90 degrees, I would have been in big trouble. But yeah, that's my main takeaway about the attendance. It was great Thursday and Friday, and it was too much on Saturday.
And when you're sitting there as a handicapper and you're looking at the cards that are coming through, what goes through your mind when you see the overnight or when you see the past performances for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
It's honestly, it was a little overwhelming. Like I try not to go crazy with these bigger cards because I'm a multi-race player and there's just so many horses that can win so many of these races that I try to back off a little bit and just play maybe doubles or pick threes. But yeah, it's obviously exciting if you can find horses to really key on. But it's just one of those, it's a gift and a curse because there's a lot of opportunity, but then there's also so much opportunity for over analysis where you just go through this race and you can find a different horse that you like every single time. That was kind of what happened to me this weekend. I had some good success early, not so much over the weekend, just because like I look at these races and I'm like, I kind of like that. Oh, I kind of like that. That could be interesting. And that's typically my approach during these weekends is to kind of scale back a little bit, not go the pick five route, but at heart, I'm a degenerate. I'm a gambler, and I want the big score. And especially when you got your buddies there, like shout out to Tom Bellhouse and Lamar Sephora and all the guys from West Point who were there who went in with like on pick fives and pick fours with me. It was like that makes it a little bit easier, but it really is overwhelming as a handicapper. There's just so many directions you can go, but that's what keeps people coming back and what makes the attraction. And the handle, as you saw, record-breaking handle for a non-Triple Crown year. That was, considering how many people I saw on the track, I was not surprised, but it was still great to see. And I think it bodes well for next year as well.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening, you can't see the video. This is Jonathan Green from DJ Stable, and I'm here with my co-host, interviewing my co-host, Joe Bianca, with regard to his feelings and reflections about the Belmont at Saratoga for the first time. Joe, let's give the audience a little bit of an opportunity to kind of walk in your shoes. You're up there at Saratoga. You wake up in the morning. Give us what the typical day was for Joe Bianca during the course of the 12, 14 hours that you were conscious.
Well, I'm extremely hungover. First of all, you mentioned it. That's the first thing. Got to shake the cobwebs out. But yeah, so we went out for morning training on Thursday, which was really nice. Had a bunch of West Point partners there. Watched the horses train. Had some breakfast. So that was fun. Then we went over to the races. We went back, got some lunch. Went over to the races, and obviously posted up at the paddock bar. That's the place to be. I kind of want to gatekeep it a little bit because it's not as crowded as the Jim Dandy bar, but the paddock bar to me is the best place to hang out at Saratoga. It's covered. There's fans. If it gets too hot, it's like a 360-degree bar, so you can stand on any side of it. It's got you can like walk 20 feet to your left and watch the horses go out to the track. So you can hang out right by the horse path as they go out to the track, so you can get a real up close look at the horses and the horse flesh. If that's part of your handicapping, see who looks good, see who's on their toes. So you might be a little bit keyed up. They're right there, right in front of you. That's one thing about Saratoga that I try to impart to people who have never been there, how close you can get to the horses.
Yep.
Because, a lot of tracks, like the paddock is pretty far removed, the horse path is pretty far removed, but at Saratoga, from the horse path, from the barns to the paddock, and now the horse path out to the track, they're right there. Like they're like 3 feet in front of you. So it really is a breathtaking thing to see the horses that close. So yeah, we usually hang out at the paddock bar most of the day, have a few drinks, tell a few stories, and maybe put a pick 5 ticket or two together. And then, once the card wraps up, we'll probably head over to Ciro's. Ciro's was bumping on Friday night. They had a great cover band, which was really fun. Great crowd, but not too crowded. And then there's so many places, so many great places you can go to get dinner. Hamlet and Ghost is terrific. We went to Pinnell's. We went to Panza's. There's 15 Church. That's one thing about Saratoga, and that I'll also mention is that I'm naturally a snob when it comes to food, being a born and bred New York City guy my whole life, because we have the best food in the world as far as I'm concerned. So anytime I go out of town, I'm like, yeah, this is good, but it's not New York City good. Saratoga is one of those places that has a lot of joints that are New York City good. And John, you can attest to that too. So yeah, you can't really go wrong with the restaurants. Oh, and the other thing I want to mention is Wednesday night, they closed off Broadway and they had a Blues Traveler concert. And that was awesome. Like that was a unique experience as well. And that's one of the things that that came out of COVID here in the city is we have a lot of open streets now where they'll block off the street for traffic for the weekend, and they'll have concerts or they'll have events. And so Saratoga had a little taste of that on Wednesday night. And I hope that's something they do at least a couple times during the summer meet.
So you're there on Saturday and you've watched 10 races run so far before you start to make your way to the paddock for the Manhattan. Granted, you're 15-1 in the morning line odds, but you have a puncher's chance in that race. Are you nervous? What are the feelings that are going through your mind and your stomach as you're walking into the paddock to watch Ohana Honor be saddled and ultimately launched onto the racetrack?
Yeah, I mean, this is, and I'm sure you can relate to this, John. It's definitely not as much pressure when you're 15-1. Like if you had a horse that's 4-5 or 6-5, it's like, oh God, how is this going to go wrong? It's just that's our natural inclination when there's a lot of expectations. But with Ohana, I felt good with Ohana just because he's such a hard trier, like I mentioned, and he is an overachiever and he is a developing horse. And we had Signator earlier in the card running the Suburban, and he's okay, but he doesn't try as hard as Ohana Honor does. He's this one of those horses that kind of likes to run around the racetrack and doesn't really have that killer instinct. So I felt good. I thought we were a little bit disrespected, honestly, in the betting at 16-1, and he proved me right. And there are just certain horses that like maybe they're not good enough to win, but they're going to try their hardest. They're going to give you their A effort. And he's one of those horses. And John, I'm sure you can attest to this, that like when you have those horses, and like Webslinger's a great example of that kind of horse. He might not win, but he's going to try hard. He's going to be close. So I'm sure you have like a peace of mind when he goes out there that he's going to give you his best, and whatever that is, like at least he did that. And that's how I feel about Ohana. Obviously there's butterflies when they're loading into the gate, like you're hoping for a good trip. But when you have the right horse who has the right mindset, I think it does ease some of the tension.
Absolutely. No, you're right. And then the day you lose those butterflies when they get into the gate is the day you should be out of the business, because every time you should hope that they're going to have, there's going to be excitement of the possibility of what could happen. When you were there in the mornings, to me, that's always my favorite part of the day up at Saratoga is the mornings, watching horses train, kind of, chewing the fat with other people and talking about the next couple of days events. were there any babies that you saw up there that you're getting excited about, or any horses where you were like, wow, being up close and personal with this horse, I have a new outlook on it?
It's tough because there's partners there, and you're kind of interacting with them. You're not paying as close attention to the horses as you would normally if you were just there by yourself. I did see Torpedo Anna gallop by. She was all class, and it did make me a little bit more confident in her on Friday in the Acorn. But it was a little difficult to figure out who was who, and it's a constant
Yeah.
influx of horses going back and forth. But one thing I will say is that I was impressed by how many horses were there.
Right.
Like, I didn't expect there to be that much traffic on the backstretch, but there were hundreds and hundreds of horses who came out to train that morning. And it just, beyond just that week, it gets you juices flowing for the summer meet, because it's just going to only get bigger and better from there. The stars are going to be out every single morning. So no, there's nobody that really stuck out to me in particular, but that's kind of mainly because I was busy doing other things. But I was impressed by the amount of horse flesh up there. And like I said, it's only going to grow from here going into the July season.
Yep. Last question for you. So now NYRA has this under their belt. They're obviously going to try to do, some things. David O'Rourke was quoted as saying, yeah, we're going to implement, and bring in more bathrooms. And we're going to try to help out as far as the lines for booze and for betting, which are all important things. You were there, you walked the earth there for 3 or 4 days. What recommendations would you bring to the table to be able to make it an even better event for 2025?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, cap it at 45,000. Even just 5,000 less, I think would have made a big difference in how comfortable people could be. I do think more bathrooms, like porta potties, all that stuff is great. It was so weird, and the women were very excited about this, especially the women in my life, that all the lines were for the men's bathroom. The women just skated right in, and that's the opposite. Usually the experience is the other way. The men are like, just go to the bathroom, and then the women are waiting for hours on end to go. And yeah, they were, Megan in particular was like, oh man, I wish I could have been there to see that. But yeah, so more bathrooms. I do think one of the things I saw was that in the parking area, there were 100 trailers. I don't know what that was about, whether they're TV trailers or whatever, but they took up a lot of real estate in the parking area. And you just got to work out the kinks a little bit. Some of my tickets wouldn't scan for the week, but it's understandable. It's the first time they're doing this, so yeah, just tighten up some things, more bathrooms. But I think overall, for this being the first time they've ever done it, it was a smashing success, and there's a lot to be proud of for David O'Rourke and NYRA, because I think most people came away from this thinking, wow, can we do this all over again next year? Luckily, we get to. Rail Talk is sponsored by TaylorMade. So those November breeding stock sales are right around the corner as of now. I'm recording this on Tuesday, June 11th. You got 51 days for the major deadline, August 1st. TaylorMade will take care of you from the yearling sales all the way to the breeding stock sales. They'll take care of the brood mares, the weanlings. They're the top class at pretty much every single sale. They're going to be heavy at Keeneland November, Fasig November, all the yearling sales throughout the summer. They just do it better than anybody else. And I'm not just saying that because they're a sponsor. We know the Taylor family. John obviously works very closely with them. They just do everything right. They treat every horse and every client like they're the most important one in the entire operation. And they're just, go see them, go see their consignment, because they're the top of the line. And they're not just the top of the line in the sales. Obviously, TaylorMade Stallions has made a big mark in the industry, particularly not this time. And John, you mentioned it earlier. They had a great weekend for their top class, their top A stallion, as well as the rest of the roster.
Well, it was great to see Not This Time represented with Cogburn, as we mentioned before, winning the Grade 1. And there was a Not This Time exacta in that race. So first and second for Not This Time. But, Joe, the interesting thing about it is there's this, we talked about, good horses coming from any price point in the marketplace. And you look at TaylorMade Stallion roster, and yeah, they have Not This Time, but they also have lesser expensive horses that are still, working their way up as far as proving themselves. Dr. Scheibel, Early Voting, Idol, Instagram, Instilled Regard. Oh, and by the way, Knicks Go, whose first yearlings are going to be showing up this year at public auction, Roatan and Tacitus. So, there's some really good value there on the Stallion roster. And you mentioned about their abilities, TaylorMade's abilities at the sales. It never ends for them. We were talking to our representative Jeff Hazlett at TaylorMade about which yearlings were going to go into which sales. It was very strategic as to which ones were going to go to FASIC, which ones were going to go to the summer sale, which ones were going to go to the September sale. And now it's time, for these, for you looking at the mares and saying, okay, which mares do I want to try to capitalize on? Which ones do I want to try to put into the sale and maybe max out? Which ones do I want to breed for the upcoming year? Who do I want to breed to? And those are all conversations that we have with our representatives at TaylorMade. It's never too early to plan. That's their motto. And just giving them the opportunity to see what you have, see what makes the most sense, and how to maximize and monetize your inventory.
Okay, so we had some big news break pretty much right after we talked to Dallas Stewart last week about the Louisiana Racing Commission rescinding some of these quote-unquote emergency rule changes that they put in place, mostly on clenbuterol. That was really the most important one for a lot of trainers and a lot of horsemen, that they put the withdrawal time back to 14 days from 72 hours. And, shout out to Dallas Stewart and the Louisiana Horsemen for pushing back. And I just think that this is so... It happens sometimes in the world of politics, and government, not as often as it should, but it does sometimes when someone puts in a really unpopular policy and there's huge outcry and there's protests and all this stuff, and the people in charge have to back off. This industry, that's where the kind of insular nature of it comes in handy. There's a lot of times where the insular nature of racing is a detriment because we don't listen to the people outside of the business when we sometimes should. But this is an area where it's a benefit because the Louisiana Horsemen can reach out and they can make a stink. And you and I, John, can make a stink about this on the podcast. We weren't, plenty of people there was uproar on social media about this, and the Louisiana Racing Commission felt the pressure and had to back off. In bigger sports, in bigger industries, you probably don't have that line of communication to the decision makers. You don't have that opportunity to have that groundswell of support for changing the rules back to the way they were. So I thought that was an incredibly positive development, not just in this case, but to set a precedent going forward for other racing commissions who might be thinking of going rogue and doing things that make the horses less safe. That is not going to be okay with the racing public and the horsemen anymore.
And now, so many people have a platform to be able to voice their thoughts and their concerns and their suggestions. And I think that Louisiana recognized, they felt the pressure from a lot of different angles, whether it was Churchill Downs as, the parent company owner of Fairgrounds, whether it was Louisiana Horsemen. And Dallas was very forthright and open about his feelings and what a lot of his fellow compatriot trainers were going to be doing or not doing, as far as potentially not bringing horses to Louisiana during the winter meet. I thought, again, pat on the back, break my arm to pat myself on the back and pat you on the back, but a lot of things that we talked about during that show with regard to, hey, maybe a Kentucky Derby needs to come in and remove points from some of these races, or maybe the stakes committee needs to come in and reduce some of those graded stake races down to listed. There was a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles and a lot of different groups and a lot of different individuals, I think, that made Louisiana kind of sit up and take notice. Again, I didn't speak to anybody there, but I can't give them credit for saying, we're doing, we're going to pull back because on second thought, it's what's best for the horses. I don't think that really went into it whatsoever. I think that they were looking to implement rules that were going to basically mask and hide horses' issues and allowing them to run more frequently, at their home racetracks. And they realized that they were really looking like a pariah at that point and not looking good in the public eye. And more importantly, there were a lot of groups and individuals that were putting extreme pressure on them in the short term and in the long range view of what was going to happen to Louisiana racing, where I think they realized, okay, the safer thing to do is to just pull back and regroup and then go from there. But I don't think that the actions between Louisiana Horsemen and what's going on with Heisler and the rest of the industry is going to all of a sudden come together around a table and sing Kumbaya. I think that this is just an opportunity for Louisiana to kind of pull back, retrench, figure out how far they can push things before they start to get this avalanche of negativity again.
Yeah, well, and I want to correct something I said. This actually broke on Friday, an addendum that I thought initially in the initial announcement was that they were just rolling back some of the rule changes, but apparently on Friday I was up at Saratoga. I missed this. They rolled back everything.
Everything.
They went back. Yep.
Yep.
So they changed all of the rules back to the way they were, and I just think it's so heartening. And I got to mention also Churchill Downs and Bill Carstangen put a lot of pressure on Fairgrounds as they should, on Louisiana rather, as they should, as the owners of Fairgrounds. HISA put a lot of pressure on them by saying they're going to have special rules, and the horses that are shipping out of Louisiana are going to automatically go on the vets list. This is what we've been asking for this whole time in racing, is a united front against people who are not doing right by the horses, and we got it, and we got it in a big way. And it was just great to see. And it's got to be the standard going forward. When someone does something that's not right, we all have to unite and say, no, this is not going to be acceptable. Also, careful about opening up a can of worms on these kind of things, because shout out to Natalie Voss at Pollock Report, who's one of the best investigative reporters that we have in the business. She's got a column that she posted last night about, do conflicts of interest plague the Louisiana Racing Commission? Is the commission's executive director still an active owner of racehorses? And that's something that I think should be definitely looked into as well. We've talked about in the past with the CHRB, they had owners who had horses with Bob Baffert, and that's one of the reasons he possibly was able to get away with some things over the years. So I think you got to be careful. You don't want to open up a can of worms and draw attention to maybe some possible corruption in your racing commission. So I think they fumbled this a little bit.
They did, and sometimes groups can come back and say, okay, these are the things we did wrong. Now, if we want to implement our rules, this is the way we kind of navigate the minefield a little bit. And of course, I think they're going to be coming back with an update, maybe not in an emergency session, hidden emergency session like they did before, but maybe, come back and try to push the envelope again. Joe, again, I'm going to say this, and it's redundant, and yes, we're patting ourselves on the back, but I think it needs to be said, and that is, there were very few podcasts that came out against this. They reported that Louisiana was changing their rules, but there were very few that actually went out and said, we're going to proactively say that we don't think this is right. And, you represent a big owners group. I represent a big owners group. And I really think for us to get online and with the strength of our audience, because they also followed through on some of the things that we talked about being against these rules in Louisiana, that's a big deal. It's one thing to have a platform and report on the news. It's another thing to have a platform and impress upon the importance of safety and honesty and health of the horses, which is what we've done. And Dallas Stewart was a big, proponent of that. And I'm really happy that we had him on the show to talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's what we're trying to do on this show. We're trying to move the needle on the issues that affect racing and affect horses directly, and I'm glad we were able to do that a little bit. And I think a lot of our audience probably did the same thing on social media and echoed that and put forward their own arguments as to why this was bullshit and had to be rescinded. So we're very happy to have any kind of influence, and that our audience has any kind of influence in the business. And let's keep that up anytime something like this happens, because I guarantee you, this is not the last racing commission that's going to try to slip some shit by us and hope that nobody notices. Newsflash, guys, people notice. You got to do right by the horses. Switching to another news story that broke while I was up at Saratoga last week. Frank Stronach, obviously is the owner, not the operator anymore, of the Stronach Group and First Racing and all those companies. He was arrested. 91-year-old Frank Stronach was charged with 5 counts, including rape, indecent assault, sexual assault, and forcible confinement. He was arrested in Peel, Ontario, which is a suburb of Toronto. I will say his attorney says he categorically denies the allegations of impropriety and looks forward to the opportunity to fully respond to the charges. They haven't released the details yet in terms of how many victims there are. According to police, the incidents of assault took place beginning in the 1980s and carried on until as recently as last year. That, to me, is the big takeaway from this. Not that it would be okay in any scenario, but it's not as if they pulled like an old case from 40 years ago and decided to bring them up on charges because, they've extended the statute of limitations on these kind of things. This supposedly was ongoing conduct. And to me, John, I don't know, my question is, like, he, until very recently, obviously he's innocent until proven guilty, all that, but he, until very recently, was in charge of one of the biggest racing companies that we have. And I cannot fathom how this was not like an open secret. You go through like, and talk about like the great predators. Use the great in terms of large, not great in terms of admiring them in any way. Like Harvey Weinstein, Puffy, as all this stuff is coming out about him, like Kevin Spacey, like all these guys that allegedly abuse Harvey Weinstein in his case, proven that he abused people over the years. They had to have enablers, and they had to have people along the way that were trying to shush up victims, brush things under the rug. So to me, the question is, who at the Stronach Group and all these companies, Magna, all the companies that Frank Stronach has run over the years, who was helping him along the way not let this come out? Because you don't allegedly abuse people for 40 years and get away with it without somebody helping you brush things under the rug. And I've heard rumblings that there was a very kind of permissive culture at some of the Stronach companies along the years in terms of, oh, that's just Frank. That's what he does. You got to deal with it. I think a very toxic place for some women to work. And I think if there are any women who have been victimized by that, they should reach out. Like they should tell their story if they feel comfortable with it. But it's easy to say, oh, what a monster he was, and maybe he was, and who helped him along the way establish this kind of behavior? That's my question.
And Joe, I think there were two telling items in the press release that really struck me with regard to this alleged issue. Number one is that they're reaching back to over 40 years. I don't know anything about Canadian law, but that was a surprise to me that the statute of limitations will allow you to go back that far. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm sure there are reasons why they're enabling that time frame. But that's a long time. I mean, 40 plus years of alleged issues. To me, that shows that they must have a lot of evidence on hand to bring it back that far. The other thing was, at the end of the article, it said, basically it was like an open-ended invitation, and they said if you are or were a party to this, meaning as a victim, reach out to us because we want to include your story and your facts into this case going forward. So it obviously wasn't just like one or two off situations, that maybe did or didn't happen. Basically, I guess this situation was so pervasive within and around the alleged victim, the alleged person, Frank Stronach, that there must be a lot more cases that they think are out there. And basically they're giving them the opportunity to come and state their case. But it is not a good situation, that has occurred. And my heart goes out to all of the victims, alleged victims, and people who had to go through this while they were employed in that situation. And also all the aftermath of what they had to go through as a father of two daughters. That's the worst thing that you can hear about, is that they're in a situation professionally where they're being taken advantage of or had to endure this kind of a situation on their workplace when all they're trying to do is do their job.
Yeah, well, and even if you weren't a victim, if you were a witness to anything like this, because like I said, like I've heard rumblings that there was that kind of culture, and that sexual harassment workplace culture that has been too pervasive over the decades, especially with powerful men. The guy's a billionaire, so it inherently, the billionaires, the most powerful men in the world, they're great at keeping these things under wraps, and they don't come out until years later because they use their positions of power to intimidate people into silence. So even if you're not a victim, if you saw something, if you witnessed something working for one of Frank Stronach's companies along the way, I think you should speak up, because that's the only way that these things that these people are eventually brought to justice. Enough people speaking up to put some kind of heft behind the claims. But yeah, like I'll use the Chris Rock line, and again, alleged. This is all alleged. Nothing's been proven. But I'll use the Chris Rock line where he was talking about how people were accusing like Michael Jackson of abusing kids all this time, and people were denying it. And he was like, don't nobody accuse you of doing the same shit for decades, and there's not something there. This is not one incident. This allegedly goes back to the 1980s. I find it very hard to believe that there's not some truth behind all of this, and hopefully it gets brought to light.
I know you guys are going to be surprised and shocked to hear this, but I did make some mistakes over the past couple of podcast shows, and I just want to correct the misinformation that I put out there, because one thing that we try to do on the show, Joe, you appreciate this, is we try to be factual and straightforward whenever possible. So without further ado, here is Corrections Corner, and it's sponsored by me, because of course, Joe, you didn't make any mistakes. It's only me. So I will die on the sword on this.
We say a lot of stuff with the best intentions. Sometimes we get it wrong, so here are our corrections.
Number one, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about My Racehorse and Seize the Gray. And I kept saying that My Racehorse owned Audible. But in reality, it should have been Authentic. And I think after the 15th time, Joe, you finally corrected me. But I do want to go back and remind everybody that My Racehorse had a piece of Authentic when he won the Kentucky Derby. Secondly, last show, I said City of Troy was the only U.S.-born horse to ever win the Epsom Derby. And thanks to sponsor Andrew Stewart, who very quickly sent us a list of about 11 or 12 other U.S.-bred horses that have indeed won the Epsom Derby. Thank you, Andrew, for Marianne Bloodstock. City of Troy was the first U.S.-born horse to win the Epsom Derby in over 20 years. So I misread that. I messed up, and shame on me. And I'm sorry for slighting the other horses that were U.S.-born that did indeed hit the wire first in the Epsom Derby. So that's Corrections Corner, brought to you by Jonathan Green. And Joe, hopefully you'll never have to be in this situation where you're wearing the proverbial dunce cap for making mistakes on the show.
We won't tar and feather you just yet, but don't make it a habit, my friend. We're all about our journalistic integrity and accuracy on this show, if nothing else. So that's going to do it for episode 48 of Rail Talk. This was a really fun one. Thanks to Jon Green. Thanks to Patty Wolf, our producer, who's not here right now, but we still give her our thanks. Thank you to our associate producers, Julia Gresta, Nathan Wilkinson, and new guy, Brad Gerke. We hazed him in to the family. Shout out to Brad. Welcome aboard. Thank you to you, the viewers and the listeners, for watching. We'll see you next week back here on Rail Talk.